So we're gonna dive into lesson 2, which is still parts of the fraction unit. And this one we're gonna talk about what is a proper fraction, what is improper fraction, and we're also gonna talk about mixed fraction. What's the difference between all these? These are gonna be all fractions, but slightly in different form. Okay, so our goal for today is to define the terms of proper fraction, improper fraction, and mixed. The second one was identify if a fraction is proper, improper, or mixed, and then converting from improper to mixed fraction and vice versa. Okay, so let's first of all, what is a proper fraction? So that's your proper fractions. Proper fractions are fractions where the numerator or the number on the top is smaller than the denominator, and the denominator is the number at the bottom. So here, the following examples of proper fractions are 1/3, okay? So the numerator is smaller than the denominator. 8, 9, so there's a negative. So the numerator 8 is smaller than the 9, and so on. Okay? And 0/13. So a proper fraction always represents a number less than 1. Less than 1. What about the improper fraction? So we have a proper. What about the improper? Improper is when the numerator, the number on the top, is bigger than the denominator. Okay, so here are the following examples of improper fraction. 4/3. So 4/3 is an improper fraction. 9/9, or is also the same as or larger, so this one's equal to 1950/295, and then negative, and then 26/13. So improper fraction always represent a number that is 1 or larger. And then what are we talking about, 1 or larger? Like, where did that 1 come from? Let's see here. How can I represent 4/3? How can I represent 4/3? Visually. Oh yeah, you're already kind of figuring that out as a mixed fraction. That's right. So here we said that what's 4/3? That means you have 3 equal parts. 3 equal parts. Well, how can we get 3 equal parts? Let's say this is your whole thing, cut up in 3 equal parts. Now, if we shade all of these, if we shade all three parts, that's 3/3 only, right? 3/3. But we have 4/3. So we need to introduce another circle. And then here. So that's why they said it's always more than 1 or more, because it's going to be here. This is 3/3, and then a 1/3, so it's going to be 4/3. That's what 4/3 looks like. We'll talk about that later on. Okay, that's why it's 1 or larger, because it's one whole thing and a bit more. And I think I think Noah already kind of said something here. So when we have an improper fraction, we can convert to a mixed. How do we do that? So a mixed fraction, let's read it first, is an alternative way to write an improper fraction. Since an improper fraction represents a number larger than 1, you can write it as a mix of both a whole and a bit. A whole number and a proper fraction. So here's the following here. Example, 1 and a third. So 1 and a little bit more. Here, 13, whole thing, and 7/9 and a little bit more. 6 and a little bit more. Well, this one here could probably be reduced. And then here it's -4 and a bit. Okay? So a mixed fraction, like improper fraction, always represent a number that is 1 or larger. So let's take a look at example number 1. It says here, example number 1. Identify each of the following numbers as proper, improper, or mixed. Okay, so let's start. What would this be?
Mixed.
This is going to be a mix because we have a whole number and a bit more, right? So this is a mixed. What about 4/11ths? Proper. And how do we know it's proper?
The top is small.
Yeah, the top number, numerator, is smaller than the denominator. So this is called a proper fraction. What about 8/7? Improper. Letter D.
Proper.
Proper. Is everybody okay with that? Proper fraction because the numerator is less than the denominator. What would this be? Improper. And last but not the least, this is a mixed fraction. Okay, so now we could identify which is which. Okay. Now, if you look at this one, 4/3, what's another way of saying this? 4/3, I see that this is one whole thing, and a third. Okay? So when we look at the visual picture of 4/3, it looks like this. You have 4 1/3, so this is going to be 1 and a third. So we could convert improper fraction to mixed, or we can go from mixed back to improper fraction. Okay, we can go both directions, both ways. Let's see that. Converting, that means changing. Converting means changing mixed fraction to improper fractions and vice versa. So when working with fractions, it is much easier to add, subtract, multiply, and divide improper fractions as opposed to mixed fraction. So when we're doing operations, it's easier to do it when it's improper rather than mixed. So people have an easier time understanding the amount represented as a mixed fraction as opposed to improper fraction. So this one is easier to understand, right? 2 whole thing and a half more, right? So 2 1/2, that's easy. But then if somebody writes down 5 halves, it's not as easy. You gotta think about, like, what's 5 halves? Like, it's hard to keep that in our mind. So we could switch back and forth from improper to mix, and then from mix to improper. So here we go. And this one. converting a mixed fraction to improper. So if you want, this is, okay, this one, I'm gonna, for our next assessment, next test, maybe this is something that you wanna write, I'm not sure, okay? So if you want, you can write that down on your formula sheet for not this test, but the following one. So this is a way to convert mixed to improper. How do we do that? Let's read it. Let's read the steps first, and then we'll try to do the example. It says here, multiply the denominator with the whole number. Okay. Which one's the denominator again?
The bottom.
The bottom number. So it's saying we're going to multiply the bottom number with the whole number. So that's the first step. And then step number 2, it says here, add the numerator to whatever you got. What's the numerator again? The top number. Add whatever number you got in step 1, you add the numerator to it. Okay? And then, number 3, place this number that you just calculated over the original denominator. Okay? Now, when I was growing up in my country, which is the Philippines, people ask me, like, what country are you from? Oh, Philippines. Yeah, there you go. This is what we do, okay? To kind of do that piece. What's our first example? Our first example is 3 and 2/5. So here's what we're gonna do. And I'm pretty sure maybe like some people did it this way already. I'm not saying. So multiply the denominator with the whole number. So I'm gonna go like this. Multiply. And then whatever I got there, we gotta add. Okay. So we go 3 times 5. You do mental math, that's okay. So 3 times 5, 5 times 3 is 15. 15. Add 2. 17. So it's going to be 17. And then we just keep the same denominator. So 3 and 2/5 is the same thing as 17/5. Okay, so I'm going to do it right here. So 3 and 2/5. So you're going to multiply and then add. And then keep the same denominator. So that's going to give us 17/5. Good?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, let's try this one. It says here, I forgot to mention this, a negative sign is ignored during this conversion or simply just place it in front of the improper fraction. So here, this is a -5. You just go -5 and 4/7. So what are we going to do? Just ignore that negative. Just rewrite it there. We know it's going to be some negative number. What do? Multiply. And then add. Okay, so 5 times 7. That's going to give us 35.
That's 9.
And then the 4 would be 39. So -39 over, what's the denominator? 7. So -39/7.
I have a question. When it's minus, when you put minus above, is it okay?
Yeah, so if it's a negative, you can just put the negative above or you can put the negative in front. That's okay. That's a good question. Okay, so why don't you try letter C and letter D and see what kind of numbers we get here. Oh, just get rid of the -5. Yeah. Just, yeah. What did you get for letter C?
29
Tristan.
over 9. 28 over 9.
28 over 9. Thank you. Oh, 29. 28 over 9. Yeah. Fix that one. Okay. I'm gonna ask another person. Joel.
The last number?
The last one. Yeah.
40 over 16.
40 over 16, so that's 32 and an 8. Okay. 40 over 16. Okay, good. That's awesome. 40 over 16. Good. Any questions? Not bad, right? Okay. Multiply and add. Okay, now we go the other way. Yeah.
So I have a question. For B, I got negative 31 over 7.
Oh, okay, okay, yes, okay. It says here, and I didn't really quite emphasize it here. It says here, a negative sign is ignored during the conversion and simply placed in front of the new improper. So when you have a negative here, just put it, just negative right away there, and then just work the. Yeah, do you want to give that a try? Let's give that a try. So ignore the negative first and just write it there. So 7 times 5, so that's going to give us 35, and then the 4. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad you asked, right? Okay, now we're going to go the other way around. What if we have an improper fraction, and then we're going to change it to a mixed fraction? Okay, so do you guys remember the long division? You know how to do long divide? Yeah, okay. So it says here, step number 1, divide the numerator by the denominator to determine how many times the denominator goes into the number. And that's our whole number. Write our whole number down. And then write any remainder over the original. So negative, and there's a note here, negative improper fraction gives negative mixed fractions. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. What do we do when we're dividing? 9 divided by 7. Now this is not the square root of 9, right? It's 9 divided by 7. It's like we're long division all over again. Okay. So 9 divided by 7. How many times is that 7? 1 time. So it's going to be 1. And what do we do next after that?
7 times 1.
1 times 7 is 7. And then what do we do next? Minus. And we're left with the remaining 2. Remainder. So this is the numerator divided by the denominator. So 9 divided by 7 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. And then subtract that. This is our remainder. So what would it be? It's going to be 1. That's our whole number. And it's going to be the remainder over 7.
When I type that and that's the answer I get in the bottom.
When you do this piece,
1, 2 over 7.
when you type this in onto your calculator,
Yeah. Go straight to that.
whoa, yeah, that's a nice calculator. I don't think my calculator does that. Oh yeah, oh that's the one that sorry, that's the one that I lend you. I meant this one, the one that I normally use. I don't think it. Okay, let's try this one. Let's try letter B. Okay, 32 divided by 5. So how many 5s fit into 32? 6, right? 6. Okay, now what are we going to do next? 6 times 5 is 30. Subtract. And then your remaining is 2. So what's the answer?
66.
This is our whole number. So 6 and 2/5. The denominator are going to be the same all the time. Okay, 6 and 2/5. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to ignore the negative. We're just going to work on this one here. When we write our final answer, it would still be negative. Okay, let's try this one. Do you notice something? This is multiply and add.
Yeah.
And what's the other one? Divide and subtract. Divide, you divide and then you subtract to get the remaining. Interesting. Yeah. You know, back then when we were learning this, our teacher never really explained those little parts, right? Okay. Here. What about this one? We're just going to ignore the negative for now, but we will put it in later. Okay? 67 divided by 8. Okay, let's see. 67 divided by 8 is 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. So 64. We're going to subtract that. It's going to give us 3. So what's our answer? 8 and 3/8. But it's going to be a negative because it says here negative. Negative 8 and 3/8. Okay, here's what you could do. I'll show you later. Okay, let's do the next one. 125 and 23. 125 divided by 23. So how many 23s fit into 125? 5. Okay. 5. Okay. What are we going to do? Multiply that to get 5 times 23. So that's going to be 115. Thank you. And then subtract. That's going to give us 10. Okay, and what's our answer? 5 whole thing. 10 over 23. And then because we started off with negative here, we're going to put the negative at the front. Okay, how's that? So we learned converting from mixed to improper and then improper to mixed. We have a little bit of time. We can get started with questions 1. Do questions 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we're here to help you if you get stuck. Question number 1 should be pretty okay, right? Because all you need to do, no calculation involved, you're writing proper, improper, or mixed. That's all.